in the fires of revolution, tested on today's front lines of freedom. Before there was a nation, there was the United States Army. From the hallowed ground of Yorktown's first stand to the unwavering readiness at Fort Bragg today, and onward to West Point's next generation of leaders. For 250 years, one force has stood ready, unshaken, unmatched, unbreakable. And today, the legacy rolls on. This is the United States Army's 250th Anniversary Parade.
Representing our joint forces, please welcome the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane. Joining us, the Secretary of the Army. Please welcome the Honorable Daniel P. Driscoll. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Secretary of Defense, the Honorable Pete Hegseth. Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, accompanied by the Second Lady of the United States, Usha Vance, and their 3 children. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and First Lady Melania Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, to honor America, would you please rise for the singing of our national anthem?
You will see by the dawn Before we even had a country, we had an army.
They started as a small, unorganized group of shop owners and farmers, but they fought the most powerful army in the entire world to a standstill in Concord, Lexington, and Bunker Hill.
Then our Continental Congress chose George Washington as general of our Continental Army.
But it wasn't until 1 year later, on July 4th, 1776, that news arrived of the signing of our Declaration of Independence.
Now we had a new army and a new nation.
With little gunpowder, no shoes, bloody feet, few cannons, little training, and even less food.
Valley Forge started in December. They went into winter camp in December of 1777. Approximately 2,000 Americans died that winter of disease.
They lived through hell, but they never ever gave up. Not this army, not this first American army.
Finally, Washington and his army arrived, here at Yorktown, where they had General Cornwallis and his powerful British army trapped in this city against the sea.
All of the preparation that Washington has learned through the course of those 6.5 years meets its full force here at Yorktown, and he employs it brilliantly.
Sailing from the Caribbean, the French Navy arrived and took on the British fleet.
Washington decided to make his move. Our men began digging to get closer and closer to the fort, finally getting within rifle and cannon range. Naturally, George Washington chose to set off our first cannon shot.
The British had two small forts in front of the main fort. They were called redoubts 9 and 10.
Then, on the moonless night of October 14th, the American and French forces attacked the redoubts. The hand-to-hand combat with bayonets, knives, and fists was bloody, to say the least. But within an hour, we were victorious.
And as the sun came up the next day, Cornwallis looked out and realized he was in serious trouble. So he prepared an all-out, desperate counterattack.
It didn't work, and the British were forced to surrender.
We were supposed to lose to the best army and the largest and most professional navy in the world.
But our young army had won the war and our freedom. The freedom we hold so dear. And 250 years later, what started as a ragtag group of shop owners has now become the most powerful army in the world.
Today, many things are very different from that army here at Yorktown, but one thing remains the same. An undying passion, guts, and love for our country is deep in the heart of today's army. When I look into their faces, you can see it. That will never change. God bless the United States Army, and God bless the United States of America.
Ladies and gentlemen, our parade is officially underway. Up first, internationally renowned as one of the world's finest professional music organizations, the United States Army Band, Marching Zone. They are the premier music organization of the U.S. Army, our nation's most senior service. Stationed at Joint Base Meyer-Henderson Hall, Virginia, it plays an important musical role in events of national and international significance. They were founded back in 1922 by Army Chief of Staff John J. Pershing. They're led today by Colonel Bruce R. Pulver and Drum Major Rob Moore. Today, Pershing Zone is playing a melody entitled The Army Goes Rolling Along. This was actually written in 1908 by the then Lieutenant Edmund Louis Snitz Gruber, which was a descendant of Franz Gruber, who composed Silent Night. It was originally written to be the 5th Artillery Regimental song titled The Caissons Go Rolling Along, and in 1956 the lyrics were revised by Harold Arberg as the official song of the U.S. Army, and then retitled The Army Goes Rolling Along. Pershing Zone carries on its century-old legacy, playing a march that brings pride to every soldier, the Army Song. 1775, the shot heard round the world that Lexington and Concord sparked a revolution, uniting 13 colonies and forging a continental army from farmers and frontiersmen. Against the odds, they turned the tide at Trenton and Saratoga, survived Valley Forge, and at Yorktown forced a British surrender, securing independence and giving birth to the United States of America. Before radios and field phones, sound was the signal. In the Continental Army, fifes and drums carried commands across the chaos of battle, telling soldiers when to advance, retreat, eat, even when to rest. That legacy actually lives on today with the U.S. Army Fife and Drum Corps, part of the 3rd Infantry Regiment known as the Old Guard. Founded back in 1960, they're the only unit of their kind in the armed forces. Performing in uniforms patterned after those worn by General Washington's musicians. Playing period instruments with patriotic precision, they bring history to life, sharing the sound and spirit of the Revolution through more than 500 performances each year, both at home and around the world too. The Old Guard, Fife and Drum Corps, everybody! And now, from high above, ladies and gentlemen, celebrating 250 years, your United States Army parachute team, the Golden Knights, the finest parachuting team in the world. Fort Sumter in 1861, a nation divided. Over 4 brutal years, nearly 2 million soldiers fought to preserve the Union. Among them, 5 future presidents and the first recipients of a brand new military decoration, the Medal of Honor. With independence won, our nation's westward expansion began. The Army moved in step, guarding settlers as native scouts lit the way. Immigrants joined the cause, and the Buffalo Soldiers etched a legacy of grit and honor across the American frontier. As they march by, a soldier's uniform signals their duty, their role, and their readiness. And by the late 1850s, official regulations outlined distinct looks, shaping the Army's identity and function across the force. Soldiers were issued 2 coats. One, a short sack coat for work and battle, with brass buttons and colored trim that marked their rank. Well, by war's end, that rugged sack coat became the soldier's uniform of choice. As the war escalated, volunteer enlistment surged. Congress authorized support for a force of up to 500,000 new troops, answering the call to preserve the Union. As they were representing the Civil War era of our nation's history is the 4th Infantry Division based out of Fort Carson, Colorado. Fort Cavazos, Texas, home of legends, the 1st Cavalry Division rides with pride. Born from the thunder of horse cavalry traditions of the Civil War, the 1st team forged its reputation on the front lines of history. They stormed Manila with a flying column, charging at Pyongyang as the first to reach the line and face the brutal crucible of Ia Drang, the first of 13 named campaigns in Vietnam where they proved their mettle. Today, that same warrior spirit lives on. You'll know the name, and you'll know them by their iconic cab hats, elite soldiers, and cutting-edge equipment. Tough, fit, fearless. The 1st Cavalry Division is a lethal, disciplined force that stands ready to fight and win anywhere, anytime, and the legacy rides on. This is the CAV. In 1914, years of escalating competition between European alliances culminate in the outbreak of the First World War. The two sides engage in a savage war of attrition, defined by opposing trenches, barbed wire, poison gas, and mass casualties. The United States initially maintained its neutrality, but was eventually drawn into the conflict in 1917. Despite having less than 130,000 soldiers at the beginning, the Army eventually grew to over 4 million, with nearly 2 million soldiers serving in Europe. In 6 months of fighting, nearly 50,000 Americans lost their lives, with another 190,000 wounded. The guns fell silent with the armistice of November 11, 1918. We continue on with more USA World War I rolling stock. This 1918 Dodge touring car was part of the legendary 1919 Transcontinental Convoy. 3,251 miles and 62 grueling days across the Lincoln Highway. Now remember, no pavement, no GPS, and no power steering. Just grit, determination, and the drive to push Army mobility into the future. This car literally helped pave the way for the roads we rely on today, and reminds us when the Army moves, the nation follows. The 1918 Dodge Touring Car. Headquartered in New York, this is the 42nd Infantry Division Band. At the start of World War I, the 42nd Infantry Division was formed with troops from 27 National Guard units, stretching across the country like a rainbow, composed of skilled musicians from all walks of life and professional occupations. They perform a variety of musical genres. Though their mission is primarily a musical one, the members were ordered into active federal service back in 2004 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. The band has also served in support of numerous state active duty missions, including cleanup efforts following Hurricane Sandy, distribution support during COVID-19, and recently, support for New York State Corrections. Commanded by Chief Warrant Officer II, Ethan Wagner, and led by Drum Major Sergeant First Class Drew Gans, the band is performing Over There, written in 1917 by Broadway composer and recipient of the Congressional Gold Medal, George M. Cohan. Representing the World War I era is the 82nd Airborne Division, based out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. You'll notice the unit is wearing replica World War I uniforms signifying the soldiers who served our nation during this time. When the Americans entered the Great War, our soldiers, under the command of General Blackjack Pershing, hit the trenches in the new standard. It was the olive drab winter service uniform. Now on their heads you see a steel helmet with sand-textured paint built to deflect deadly shrapnel from above. Not bulletproof, but battle tough. Nicknamed the Pershing boot, on their feet was the N918, 1918 French group. It was designed to survive the brutal grind of trench warfare. And on their backs, the field pack, rations, ammo, first aid, and a gas mask. Everything a doughboy needed to fight and to win. Incidentally, the 42nd Infantry Division was deployed to heavy combat abroad and then deployed again in World War II, ultimately liberating the Dachau concentration camp. The 42nd responded to the terrorist attacks on 9/11. Later, with the war on terrorism, the rainbow stretched across the world again, deploying in Iraq and Afghanistan. Thundering into view, the pride of Fort Sill, the U.S. Army Artillery Half Section. This is literally powered by horsepower and heritage. This elite ceremonial unit honors the legacy of the Army's horse-drawn artillery. With precision, discipline, and 6 majestic horses pulling a vintage 1918 caisson, the half section keeps tradition alive and rolling strong, representing the power, pride, and precision of America's field artillery. This is Fort Sill's finest, ladies and gentlemen. World War II, a global fight for freedom. In history's darkest hour, the United States Army was on the front lines. From the beaches of Normandy to the islands of the Pacific, the greatest generation faced down tyranny and turned the tide. From bombers to fighters to transports, U.S. Army aircraft started to thunder across the skies in World War II. And take a look up there, ladies and gentlemen. Flying overhead right now, they are fast, they are fierce, and famously used in the Doolittle raid over Tokyo. Leading up front, the mighty B-25 Mitchell. Up next, the Cadillac of the sky, the P-51 Mustang. From the sky, we're back down on the ground. In World War II, one vehicle led the charge, the legendary quarter-ton 4x4 command recon vehicle, the Jeep. You might have a Jeep in your driveway, but not like this. The U.S. Army truck quarter-ton 4x4 command reconnaissance, better known as the Jeep, was an iconic vehicle of World War II and was the world's first mass-produced four-wheel drive vehicle. The Army used the Jeep for almost every military activity, including command vehicles, scout cars, and medical ambulances. Fast, rugged, the Jeep became a symbol of American ingenuity. From Fort Bragg, North Carolina, this is the 82nd Airborne Ceremonial Band. The 82nd received the nickname All-Americans after a contest as it represented the diverse origins of its members from every state. This name remains today symbolized by their iconic AA patch. Fort Bragg's finest, ladies and gentlemen. Give a big round of applause, the 82nd Airborne Ceremonial Band. In a global fight like World War II, the U.S. Army knew our troops needed more than courage. They needed innovation. Uniforms evolved for every environment, but olive drab remained the mark of the American soldier. Shaped by lessons from the trenches of World War I, the Army introduced 2 battlefield essentials. The M1 helmet, tough, stable, and built to protect under fire, and the M1 Garand rifle, powerful and fast. It gave American troops a very clear edge. General George S. Patton called the M1 rifle the greatest battle implement ever designed, and history proved him right. The 82nd Airborne Division. The unit is best known for their bravery on D-Day, when 12,000 parachute and glider troops destroyed German supply lines after fighting for 33 days straight. The 101st Airborne Division, based out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, traces its lineage back to 1918 when it first established as the 101st Division. Known for their ability to rapidly deploy across the world, the unit has held a crucial role in operations since its inception. From parachuting behind enemy lines on D-Day to leading helicopter assaults in Vietnam, the 101st redefined modern warfare. In the 50s, the Screaming Eagles stood tall at home, protecting the Little Rock Nine during the fight for civil rights. In recent decades, they've been sent across the world, extents as far as the Middle East, where they took part in Operation Desert Storm and participated extensively in the war on terrorism in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Screaming Eagles continue to lead the way as tomorrow's division in today's Army. The iconic Sherman tank is here, ladies and gentlemen. It was the cornerstone of the U.S. Army, showing its military might in World War II. It became one of the most influential tank designs of the 20th century. The M4 tank is nicknamed the Sherman tank after Civil War General William Tecumseh Sherman. Actually, he was named by the British. With almost 50,000 produced during World War II, the Sherman tank was in active service until 1957. In World War II, the M16 half-track was, of course, to be reckoned with. It was a self-propelled anti-aircraft weapon with speed, firepower, and grip. Nicknamed the Meat Chopper, its quad 50 caliber mount could unleash 2,300 rounds a minute. Quite devastating. It served through Korea, Vietnam, and beyond, and remains in use with U.S. allies to this day. The M16 half-track brings the fight wherever it rolls. The U.S. Army Transportation Corps motto states, "Nothing happens until something moves." That was never more true than with this. Look at this, the 2.5-ton Chevrolet Deuce and a Half, the backbone of the Red Ball Express that kept the Allies supplied after D-Day in World War II. The Korean War, often referred to as the Forgotten War, began on June 25, 1950, with the North Korean Army's invasion of South Korea. A coalition of South Korea, the United States, and other United Nations members defeated the invasion and advanced into North Korea. The coalition fought and defeated 2 Chinese offensives in the spring of 1951. Armistice negotiations began shortly after that defeat in July of 1951, until the armistice was signed 2 years later in 1953. Combat consisted of small attacks, raids, and patrolling. During this war, the United States deployed approximately 6.8 million military forces to the Korean Peninsula. The M151 kept rolling along as the lightweight, high-mobility, general-purpose vehicle replacing the famed World War II Jeep back in 1961. Officially named the Military Utility Tactical Truck, or MUT, most servicemen generally refer to it as a Jeep. The vehicle spanned more than 40 years in 4 manufacturers and were everywhere that the Army was deployed. Another rolled by earlier, and at 2.5 tons, this Deuce and a Half, the M35A2 classic military transport truck, was a mainstay of the U.S. Army for decades, particularly during the Vietnam War and Operation Iraqi Freedom. The Deuce and a Half proved its value moving cargo, supplies, and soldiers. Its capabilities include up to 5,000 pounds off-road and 10,000 pounds on-road. making it ideal for moving just about anything. In the jungles of Vietnam, the U.S. Army faced a new kind of war. Helicopters became the new workhorses of battle, delivering troops, firepower, and supplies into some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth. This is the U.S. Army in Vietnam, the era of air mobility, fierce firefights, and unwavering brotherhood. The roar of these legendary Army helicopters takes to the air. Fly overhead right now, they help define the Vietnam War. That staccato beat of the rotor blades was a welcome sound to many troops mired in combat. From transport and medevac to close air support and reconnaissance, they brought the fight to the front and pulled the wounded to safety. The OH-6 Caillou scouted the terrain with unmatched agility. The AH-1 Cobra, also nicknamed the Snake, brought serious firepower. Its slim design, as you can see here, helped it survive and thrive in hostile environments to protect soldiers below. And the icon of the era, the UH-1 Huey, the first turbine-powered helicopter in service with the U.S. military. There was nothing the Huey couldn't do. General support, air assault, cargo transport, medic evacuation, and ground attack missions. The Cayuse, Cobra, and Huey, ladies and gentlemen, three iconic Army symbols in the sky. The 1st Cavalry Division Band, based out of Fort Cavazos, Texas, has played a vital role in U.S. military history. Since its origins back in 1855 as the band of the 2nd Cavalry, it has supported operations from the Civil War to Desert Storm. Over time, it's evolved into a powerful force using music to strengthen bonds between soldiers and engage with communities. From World War II in Korea to the Vietnam War in Bosnia, the 1st Team Band has enhanced morale and upheld the division's enduring legacy. Today, the band continues its mission using music to shape perceptions, foster trust, and promote national Army and division interests. Standing ready to serve, it remains an enduring symbol of the 1st Cavalry Division's legacy and commitment to duty. The band performs Hit the Leather and Rock March composed by Captain Robert Merritt Wilson. This piece reflects the cavalry's transition from horses to mechanized warfare, capturing the speed, the resilience, and the tradition of the division. From Fort Cavazos, Texas, everybody, the 1st Cavalry Division Band. The U.S. Army deployed large numbers of troops in support of the Vietnam War. The first contingent of U.S. Army advisors arrived in Vietnam in the late 1950s, and that quickly grew to a small team of around 100 soldiers, which then expanded to more than 600 over the next decade. As the war intensified, troops' numbers quickly grew as the war between the South Vietnamese government and the communist insurgents supported by North Vietnam intensified. By January 1969, more than 364,200 soldiers organized around 7 divisions and 20 separate combat brigades. The United States began withdrawing its forces in July of 1969, and the last Army combat unit left South Vietnam in August of '71. The last U.S. combat soldier came home March 1973, while a small number of non-combat personnel remained until April 1975. Representing the Vietnam War era is the 101st Airborne Division based out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The unit is wearing replica Vietnam War uniforms signifying the soldiers who served our nation during this time. Blistering heat, thick humidity, and unforgiving terrain demanded uniform innovation. And the Army, they delivered. New lightweight uniforms were constructed to move with the soldier. The M16 replaced the M1 Garand, calling for redesigned ammo gear and faster reloads in combat. Body armor got smarter, jackets and trousers got lighter, and field equipment was reimagined to meet the mission head-on. Gone were the heavy Mickey Mouse boots, replaced by canvas tropical combat boots that offered better grip, faster drying, and all-day endurance. Special thanks to our sponsor, Oracle. When Saddam Hussein's Iraq invaded Kuwait in August 1990, the U.S. Army deployed to Saudi Arabia to deter further Iraqi aggression in the region for what was known as Operation Desert Shield. By the fall, more than 750,000 troops comprising U.S. service members and coalition partners from more than 30 countries had assembled in the Saudi Arabian desert. In mid-January 1991, the U.S.-led coalition began Operation Desert Storm, which kicked off with an intensive air campaign designed to knock out key Iraqi infrastructure and weaken Iraqi forces. The ground offensive was launched in early 1991, where military forces overwhelmingly destroyed enemy tanks and vehicles. After only 100 hours of ground combat, coalition troops liberated Kuwait, and the Gulf War ended with Iraq's surrender. From Fort Riley, Kansas, this is the 1st Infantry Division, one of the Army's most storied divisions. Nicknamed the Big Red One because of the distinctive red on their unit patch, as the oldest continuously serving division in the U.S. Army, the unit has participated in every major operation since World War I, living up to its motto, no mission too difficult, no sacrifice too great, duty first. The 1st Infantry Division was originally established as the 1st Expeditionary Division in 1917 and spearheaded the American Expeditionary Forces in France during World War I. In World War II, the Fighting First stormed Omaha Beach on D-Day and liberated Nazi concentration camps. The highly decorated unit has had 37 members of the Big Red One awarded the Medal of Honor. In Washington, D.C., the 1st Division Monument stands in President's Park, memorializing those who died while serving in the 1st Infantry Division. Ladies and gentlemen, they are the Big Red One, the 1st Infantry Division. More military rolling stock. During Operation Desert Storm, the M2 Bradley fighting vehicle proved its value on the battlefield. It is fast, it is tough, and it is lethal. Named for General Omar Bradley, a leader from Point Spain class in 1916, the Bradley was built to carry troops into combat with protection and power. Armed with a 25mm chain-driven cannon and twin tube-launched optically tacked wire-guided missiles, it played a critical role in clearing the way during the ground assault into Iraq. While the Paladin looks and sounds like a tank, it is technically a self-propelled howitzer and was first introduced back in the 1960s. Over the years, it's been upgraded to perform in versatile battlefields from Vietnam to the Soviet Union to Iraq. In the Gulf War, no division hit harder or moved faster than the 1st Armored. The 1st Armored Division, nicknamed Old Ironsides, is the oldest, most recognizable armored division in the United States Army. As part of the buildup for World War II, cavalry and reconnaissance units were brought together to form the 1st Armored Division in 1940. In the Gulf War, no division hit harder or moved faster than the 1st Armored. Old Ironsides really led the way. During Desert Storm, they engaged in some of the largest tank battles in Army history that were decisive victories, shattering enemy formations. Based in Fort Bliss, Texas, America's Tank Division is currently supporting missions in 20 countries across 5 continents. From World War II to today, Old Ironsides remains battle-proven and always ready. First used in Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm, the M119 howitzer brought precision firepower to the front lines. Lighter and more mobile than larger artillery, it was built for the infantry brigade, able to fire high into the air or directly at the target depending on the mission. Whether used in battery formation or as a standalone support weapon, the M119 delivered reliable, responsible fire when it mattered most. Still in service today, including on the front lines in Ukraine, it remains a trusted part of the Army's arsenal. September 11, 2001, terrorists destroyed the World Trade Center in New York City and struck the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. using commercial airliners. In response, the U.S. launched the global war on terrorism. The U.S. would stop potential threats around the world and take the fight to terrorist groups and the nations that back them. The Army immediately deployed forces to Afghanistan to destroy Osama bin Laden's al-Qaeda terrorist organization and depose his sponsors, the ruling Taliban. The 2003 President Bush expanded the war to Iraq. Soldiers and other armed services overthrew Iraq's dictator Saddam Hussein. The fight to stabilize Iraq and prevent terrorist groups from overthrowing its new government continues to this day. The campaign in Afghanistan lasted until 2021 when U.S. forces withdrew and the Taliban returned to power. Over the course of the two-decade conflict, over 2 million servicemen and women, +% of the American population, deployed in support of the global war on terrorism. Most of those who served were members of the United States Army.